Hey guys, how's everyone doing?
Great. I have a question. How can I check it on the YouTube just to make sure it's actually good?
Yeah. Let me give you the link. Um, I'll
Can
DM.
I
I'll
can you share
we
a
have
link
a
to book, please? Wow, people are already asking for links to the book.
Take our course. Take our course.
Yep.
I'm still writing it. That was a workshopping session. So this is our first time doing a live workshopping session of this. So I am slightly nervous that Eugene is going to be like, "This was horrible. Never ever whatever." Um, but yeah, I'll maybe go over high level what we're gonna do. So this is we know that you all don't have the book, but what we did was we told Eugene, please read the first three chapters. Let us know what sticks, what doesn't stick, and we have a bunch of targeted questions. You know, Eugene is a very senior. Possibly even higher title than very senior applied scientist. Oh, did we lose Hemo? Oh, no, now he's back. You're back.
Sorry. I
No,
clicked
you're
wrong
good.
button.
I was
Yeah.
introing Eugene. So Eugene is a good friend of ours, very senior applied scientist at Amazon. And what I admire most about Eugene is how willing and open he is to share his thoughts um, on things that he himself is also learning with the community. He has a very extensive blog. I have learned a lot from it. Everything from I started following Eugene back when he was writing about recommender systems. To now when he's writing about LLM as a judge, to evaluations, to you can't measure what you can't improve, you can't improve what you can't measure. The whole it's a great journey to follow. So I highly recommend checking out his blog. So today, I have a bunch of questions prepared for Eugene around kind of his experience with some of the failure modes and some of the frameworks that we're presenting in the first three chapters. Maybe I'll start with a very brief, high level overview of kind of what's the three chapters are about. First, we kind of talk about what is evals and why evals are so hard, at least in our experience. Why is it different from traditional ML or ML ops, traditional software engineering? Then we go into a little bit of thinking about how to work with an LLM. So how does an LLM work as a black box? How do we reason about its strengths and weaknesses? How do we use it effectively? And then kind of some getting our feet wet into thinking about what does an eval mean when we're building applications? What kinds of metrics would we want? And how might we get some of the building blocks to compute those metrics, for example, labels? And then the third chapter that Eugene also skimmed over is the very first stage of the evaluation life cycle, which maybe we'll go through in the diagram. First, you do an error analysis, analyze, then you measure things at scale, then you improve based on your measurements. So Eugene and we will discuss kind of the process of error analysis from looking at your data to organizing that into structured failure modes and iterating on those over time. So without further ado, I'm going to move to my questions. And I'm going to hit Eugene with the first one. Eugene, you ready?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay. So thanks for taking your time to read and review. And you're the first one doing this. So I'm curious from your perspective at Amazon, what are some of the most pressing challenges in LLM evals that you see on a day-to-day basis? And do you feel like these chapters touch on these well so far? And what parts of them might you resonate with?
Yeah. Well, thank you, Shreya. It's a huge honor to be one of the first few to read the book. It really resonates with me. I think the main challenge with evals is that people just don't do them. They don't know how to do them. And when you look at a lot of the biggest issues that come up, that gets you negative press or has customer impact, some of the biggest issues is just not having evals to know how to even write the prompt well.
Mm,
Some of the biggest issues is just not having evals to know that the model cannot actually do the thing. Well, the current generation of model can't do the thing, and maybe what you're trying to reach for is way too far ahead. You actually are blind on that. And then the other thing is that maybe you have evals on a very small surface area, like the common stuff. But when you get to the tail, especially on something that has very large scale, you actually don't have insight. This doesn't mean that you have to have very comprehensive evals, but you probably need it to be more comprehensive than you think right now, especially you have wide customer impact.
totally. I've also resonate a lot with long tail and inability to specify prompts well in the first place. So why don't we go right into chapter 1? My first question about that kind of being, you know, this. Okay, I'm going to scroll through to kind of where I say where you can use evals for.
Actually, do you mind scrolling up to the
Okay.
3 gulfs?
Yeah, tell me about that first.
This really resonated with me. I actually didn't think of it this way. And I think that understanding the different gulfs helps you understand where you're lacking. And it's also that even if you fully close the gulf of specification and the gulf of generalization, if you don't close the gulf of comprehension,
Let's back up a
it
little
doesn't
bit.
make sense.
Let's describe what the gulfs are first, if you don't mind, somebody.
Sure, yeah.
Shreya.
Oh no. I know I will have communicated this well if someone else can describe it. So I'll tell you how this figure came about. I thought about what are all of the problems that I face when trying to write LLM pipelines, and what are the different hats I have to wear when building good LLM pipelines. And one hat is my error analysis hat. Of I just have to like make sense of what's going on, not just in the data, but also like not just in the LLM outputs, but also in the data itself. What are the different clusters of data? If you're familiar with data science, you're familiar with this problem. The other hat that I wear is, how to be a good communicator because I have to write prompts, right? I have to specify everything in excruciating detail to the LLM for it to understand. It has to be unambiguous. And this is very hard to do. And then the last thing is your traditional ML problem, right? Like I've written the pipeline, but does it generalize to my data? Does it generalize to other people's data? If I deploy it out in the wild, will it work? And this is what we call the Gulf of generalization, which is how do you improve, how do you do task decomposition, fine tuning, prompt optimization, all of these strategies that you have to invoke, putting your ML hat on. So I would say, yeah, these are Gulf of comprehension is your data science hat. Gulf of specification is your good communicator, good writer hat. And then generalization is you're good at machine learning and software engineering. So
So
What
can
I
we
like
go
about
into a
this
little bit
is
more, if you don't mind? Like, okay, I haven't memorized it just yet. I really like this articulation also. So, like, Gulf of generalization is, for example, you have correctly specified everything in the LLM, and you have a good prompt, but the LLM is still failing to do what you want, and that's like a gulf that you have to cross. Um, okay, and then gulf of specification is like, is it just correct me if I'm wrong? That's when you haven't refined the prompt enough. You haven't specified your intention correctly. You have to do that iterative cycle. What's comprehension again?
comprehension is making sense of the data. So also we could change these names. I'm not tied to the names, but what we say when you say look at the data, uh, the artifact of that is like some knowledge in your head of what your data is about and what your failure modes are about. That you
I see.
definitely.
So you have to have like comprehension of what you want to be able to specify it.
Yes. Yeah, and that's what we say of, there's this iterative cycle, right? Like you write a prompt, you look at the outputs, then you learn something about what's going on. That learning part is this gulf of comprehension.
One thing I really liked about this gulf, and you might want to spend a little bit more time talking about it, like why you created this mental model. One anecdote that I really liked in the paper is every problem that you encounter, you have to build the bridges anew. I remember that phrase. Um, and I really like that. That helped like
Hmm.
make it sticky for me, like this water and these islands. You talk a little bit about like, okay, yeah, what made you want to create this mental model of like this cycle and these islands and stuff?
Yeah, short answer, I'm an HCI researcher, or I'm a CS researcher who likes doing HCI. And I like to study how people iterate on pipelines. And I really figured that these are the three hats. This goes back to like these are the three hats that you wear and you're interchanging between when you're kind of developing pipelines. Um, but yeah, it's nothing more to that. I don't know.
I mean, it's very natural, Shreya, but I guess a lot of us have a lot. I learn a lot from this, and I especially like that it's a tripod. You can't just
Hmm.
have two legs without one of them.
Yeah.
And it helps me think a little bit better. It's like when someone comes to me with a problem, okay, maybe is it a problem that's not well enough, or do you not fully understand your errors, or are you just not thinking about the long tail? That's how I
Yes.
think about specification, comprehension, and generalization. I
Yes.
also do think that there's another gulf though, which is the gulf of model capability. In the
Hmm.
sense that you could be doing all of this right, but the model just cannot do this right now, the current generation of models. You
Yeah.
see that sometimes, yeah.
That's very interesting. I imagine that that is kind of part of this generalization gulf of like, okay, it's not working, but I've specified it so well. So now I have to wait for a better model, or I have to fine tune models, or I need to do RAG or task decomposition or whatever it is. But it's interesting that you say this because I think a lot of people face this problem, myself included, is you don't know when you've like hit the ceiling
Yeah,
of
it's
the
hard.
model.
It's hard to
Right?
know.
It's like, how do you know that it just the model won't work for this kind of task, right? Like maybe if you decompose the task better, or if you fine tune the model, maybe it'll work, right? And I think a lot of people, well, first, very few people get to that stage where they're able to push the ceiling. But when you do get to that stage, and it sounds like you've been there, I think I'm curious if you feel like you have any tips or strategies for one, like knowing you're in that you've like pushed the boundary, and then two, what do you do? Do you wait for a new model? Do you just say, okay, I'm going to do something else?
So, in to speak more about the gulf of generalization, how I think about it is that okay, your model works probably 50%, 80% of the time, but there may
Mhm.
be a few edge cases that in the long tail they just haven't taken care of. And you have a great example in the book that talks about this, about the email name extraction. That's how I
Mhm.
think about it. So the gulf of generalization is that there are a couple of edge cases that you just haven't taken care of, and in the long tail, that's going to happen.
Yeah.
The gulf of model capability is you try and do something, and it just cannot be
Mm.
done. So maybe 2 years ago, if you try to summarize a video transcript, you could try to do a lot of map reduce hacky ways, but the
Yeah.
quality is just not quite there. The tone is not quite there. It hallucinates. And now this is not a problem. You can fit in the entire thing and Gemini will spit out the entire transcript for you. And you can even do all kinds of modalities, right? But in the past
Yeah,
it's not
that's a
possible.
relatively new thing, and it's really good now.
Yeah.
All of a
And and,
sudden,
and we take
yeah.
it all for granted, but if you were asked to solve that problem in the past, you'd be like banging your head against the wall, trying all these smart hierarchical map reduce techniques. I know there's a lot of packages around there that do all that, but all of that is like obsolete for good or for worse, in the sense that a lot of things are just simpler now. It's just all pushed into the model. But that's the gulf of model specification, whereby it doesn't work for more than 80%. It doesn't work more than 80% of the time. So it's
Mm.
flipped. That's how I
I
think
like
about it.
that. I really like that distinction. I might steal that quote you put it back in the book. But that's what this is useful for.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
so oh sorry, keep
so,
going.
so I just want to say that I love this. No matter what your editors tell you to do not cut this out. This is one of the things that I highlighted in green. This is novel, new to me, and I will apply
Mm.
it in when I help teams triage what the errors are.
Oh, that's so great. Cool. Hamel, you had a question before and we talked over you, or no?
No, I'm fine.
Okay, that's good. Cool. So the question that I wanted to get to, which I already forgot, so let me put up my Google document again. Yeah. Oh, yes. So regarding the Gulf of specification, I was going to go to the Gulfs. What are some ways, concrete examples of where you've seen people get lost in the specification Gulf? Going back to your statement earlier about how people just get lost in prompt writing.
So I think there are two main failure modes. And the first one I'll tell you that's the most common is like people hear about this thing called few shot prompts and they write a single example.
Hmm.
Um, in older models, and to some extent in the current models as well, when you provide a single example, the model overly focuses on that example. It just gives too much attention
Hmm.
to that. And sometimes when you run a lot of samples, you will regurgitate just that sample. And a lot of times, it won't return a sample, but you'll return output that's very swayed by that sample. So for example, imagine if you were recommending clothes for some reason, and you provide two examples, both female fashion, both high fashion. Now, when it gets to a point whereby you're recommending clothes for males, that's not high fashion, the model just gets swayed too much. It learns too much from the in-context learning. And then
Interesting.
people come to me, it's like, why is this happening? It's like, have you tried removing the example? Remove the example. It is better, but it's worse on
Interesting.
the reason why they added it. So therefore, if you want to add instructions, first you try to add criteria that cover the examples.
Mm.
If you do want to add examples, you do need to add quite a number of examples. Essentially, your examples need to be representative so that when you're trying to solve the gulf of specification, you don't accidentally open the gulf of generalization.
Oh, that's such an interesting take. Yeah. So, okay, summarizing what you said. One is start out with specific criteria, and then two, it's very similar to traditional machine learning and data science, which is have a representative sample, like take your data, actually create a training set out of it. Have a representative sample of that in your prompt. Because
So
if you don't do this data science well, right, you're opening other cans of worms that you're going to try to fix that could have been fixed with your correct methodology in the first place.
yeah, so increasingly, I'm thinking of in-context learning just like regular machine learning. Your input samples need to be fairly representative. You definitely need a lot less now. You may not actually need entire samples like a data frame samples. You can even write higher level criteria or patterns. You can do pattern matching fairly well, but it needs to be representative. So now it doesn't mean that, okay, you have to cover all the edge cases. There will still be edge cases, but you cannot be overly specific. You have to put in care when you're writing this prompts and future examples.
How how do you feel like you can iterate on this and make progress? I know this sounds like a very vague question, but often in the stage, right, people don't have evals in the specification stage, and you kind of have to make gut decisions on what examples to include or what not to include. Can you talk a little bit about how you approach that?
Yeah, so I think there's two main splits. The one split is if you already have a product, okay, just look at the data, try to figure out what kind of queries, what kind of actual input traffic would come in.
Mhm.
And then you look at that, you try to find out the main patterns, and then you write based on that. Now, if you don't have data, if you're building a completely new feature, let's say a chatbot for a website, you
Yeah.
probably have to guess what kind of queries users will come with. And sometimes it can be very basic. And if you have a good understanding of a product, you've got understanding of users, you probably will know what kind of queries will come in. And you may also need to come up with red team queries. So that's how I would do it. And maybe you just need like maybe 5 or 6 big buckets, maybe 10 or 20 questions from each of those. I think that will go a very, very long way.
Nice. Do you feel like there's ever such thing as too many examples?
No, as a data scientist, I definitely don't think that. I definitely do think that more data is always good. And with LLMs, you can very easily analyze it, and it's
Totally.
just standard. I think there's also another problem with specification
Hmm.
is that, you give an example of how you write prompts, right? There's roles, etc. Another problem I see is when users write the system prompt and it's written in such a way that actually leads to a foot gun. So, for example, you may want your model to be very friendly. You may want your model to be you might say something like, you are a trusted advisor, right?
Okay.
Now, what happens is that the model may become too candid and frank, and perhaps even judgmental in the responses.
Hmm.
Because you have prompted it that you are trusted, I trust you, you should be open-minded with me. What happens because we try too hard to push it in a certain direction, it actually gets pushed in the wrong direction. In this case, the advice I've given and the advice that the labs have given is, just keep it simple, don't add too much of this superfluous
Yeah.
education.
That is also interesting to me because it is very context dependent and cultural, right? You might say
Yes,
something like you're a trusted friend or advisor to somebody, and if they know you, they might say, okay, this means like I should handle this conversation with care. I shouldn't say things that are mean.
exactly.
Whereas, like in a completely different culture, you could be like, be open, interpret that as being open and honest and direct.
So let's go back to our fashion example again, right? You
Yeah.
are a trusted fashion advisor. What do you think about this outfit? And then maybe the LM might respond, Eugene, come on, how old are you? Why are you thinking of wearing this? You think you're still 20? So something like that, right? You can imagine that um in the long tail, things like that do happen. So you just do want to be careful about it. And of course, the final Gulf specification is that because we keep trying to solve the Gulf specification, we try to make it more and more specific, we actually forget to refactor our prompts. And that is a lot of times when people come to me with prompts that are just not good,
Mm.
I just cut it in half or like reduce the space and it just works again. So I think like prompts are now like code. You do have to constantly refactor out functions. It's just that sometimes your prompt just returns many different scores for different tasks. You maybe want to refactor them out and then you want to simplify it as well. And
Yeah,
because if you have evals and it works just as well, it saves you problems downstream.
totally. I like the saying of prompts as code because that is what it is, but it's a little different, right? Because you can't statically make sense of it as well as you can make sense of code, right? When you read a Python function, you know exactly what the computer does if it's a small Python function. No questions asked. But sometimes you just don't know with LLM. So
I agree with that. And recently I've been a little bit skeptical of agentic workflows. And if you follow my L account, you probably see this. But recently I've been trying it and trying to push it. And you can write a single prompt, like maybe 2 pages long, and get the LLM to just do the thing
yeah.
for hours at a time, and it will work. Now tell me, is that not an ETL pipeline? Is that not an ETL pipeline for a sample of one? Just doing
Yeah.
all the things, doing web search and doing all the summarization and everything. That is a function where you just give it an input and it comes out an output. Now it's not the standard kind of code that we see, but actually it
Totally.
works like that. So that's how
Maybe
it
the
works
most
now.
energy inefficient ETL
Yeah.
pipeline in the world, but I do like the framing of that. Yeah. Anyways, I know we're really banging
We're
everyone's head
taking
around
long.
this golf's three golfs model. But maybe let's go into more things that are more specific to how to go about eval. So one of the things that we
Just to
write,
linger a little bit on the golf thing,
Noah loves the
w-
golfs.
why is it useful to know what golf you're on? Like it's worth like just like repeating that because might be wondering like, why these golfs. I know, but it's good for you to explain.
I think we'll actually have different answers. My answer here is it helps to know what hat to wear, what tools to be having in your tool belt when you're going about solving a problem. So if you're in a situation where you recognize like, oh, the model is not powerful enough, right? Like you want to be able to switch modes to this and do research into like or think about like how to construct fine-tuning data sets, for example. If you're in a situation where you don't know what is in your pipeline, you want to wear your data science hat or open up those tools and figure out how to move there. That's what I think is most powerful, but I'm sure others.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think it helps you diagnose what the issue is. And if you're diagnosing the issue, so let's say your prompt is great, but you still think it's a prompting issue, but it's actually that you haven't looked at the data enough to. So that's how it helps you focus your energy.
Yeah, I feel like the data island is ignored too much. No matter how much we repeat it constantly, that's the one that people don't think about.
It's hard. It's really hard to look at data. People don't quite understand how to look at data. And sometimes when I plot a table, I have all these metrics. People will be like, "How do you even read this table?" Like maybe because I've just been looking at data for a while. I wish I could teach people how to look at data. But I don't know.
Oh, we're gonna get to that soon. I'll have my last comment on this. I guess this goes back to Hamel's question of like how this came about. I think that all of these pairs of islands are like of active areas of research and development all the time, but only application developers uniquely actually have to consider all three. Like I'll tell you exactly like developer and data, like that bridge, there's so much data tooling, there's so much data science frameworks, everything to like there are whole industries around data science for this, barring the LLM pipeline, right? Developer to LLM pipeline, like this is all like HCI and UX and ChatGPT, and you know how can we collaborate with LLMs? LLM pipeline and data, that gulf of generalization, like the entire machine learning and AI community is focused on. You know, we have very well defined tasks, and how do we just make models solve them well? But when you're building an application, you got to do all three, and there's nothing around it. And I think that's kind of what has made people really stuck for a really long time. But anyways, okay.
I
enough
like
talking
that. That's a
in
really
there.
good explanation. Yeah, the goal for generalization, I feel like that's the one that foundation model providers are trying to solve
Yep,
mostly. And they're
totally.
telling you as the application developer, like, don't put your moat around this because we're going to
Hmm.
steamroll you. You know, but it is still useful for application developer to know because like things like fine tuning, you might want to you need to pay attention to that.
Yeah, exactly what Eugene said earlier. Like, this model capability may not be there. Um, all right. So finally, moving onwards, the next thing that we kind of really first introduce, and this is our first attempt at it. So Eugene, welcome all criticism and feedback here.
I just want to say that this is the other thing that I highlighted in green. No matter what, you have to pick this. Yeah, that's figure two.
Excellent.
Yeah.
But my question for you was going to be, I'm sure you've done this cycle over and over and over again at Amazon, still probably doing it right now. So, two questions here. Which box do you feel like you spend the most time in from analyze, measure, and improve? And the other thing is, what are either sub boxes of these that are important to be elevate to their own box? Or some boxes to be aware of, in error analysis. Maybe there's some big thing involved in there, but it's still clearly an error analysis.
I think the hardest box is measurement.
Hmm.
So I'll talk about it. I think analysis is like you look at the data once. If you know what you're doing, you can sort of figure out what the key failure modes are. You can create a few hundred samples as your eval set. And that's one and done. It's like good capex. I don't mean it for one and done. It's like the big chunk of effort is done. And then improvement is like once you sort of have a good reward model / auto evaluator, you can sort of improve on that. And that's somewhat of a software engineering problem.
Hmm.
What is really, really, really hard is how do you translate your evals into an automated black box that measures yourself against it? And a big part of this is like, okay, everyone's using LLM evaluators right now. How do you calibrate your LLM evaluators to perform well on the evals? It's really hard. And I wish there was an easy way to do this. I haven't figured out how to do this. Like the app I built, Align Eval, was trying to do this, but even then, optimizing the prompt, trying to get it to where it is still very challenging. And if this measurement is not good enough
Hmm.
directly, you won't be able to use it to optimize the generator. I think of the auto evaluate the LM evaluate the LMS judge is a validator, right? And then you can use it to optimize the generator. If this validator is just not strong enough or reliable enough, there's no point going to try to optimize the generator.
I have a question for you
And
here.
the reason why I say that this is the hardest thing and takes me the most time, I can get other people to do the analysis. I think PMs and subject domain experts are very good at it. I can get other people to do the improvement. Software engineers and other scientists are very good at that. I haven't been able to find. I found it very challenging to try to figure out how to take the qualitative and convert it to quantitative.
Hmm.
Hamo, you had a question.
Yeah. So when Shreya posed that question, I was thinking in my mind, feel like I spend most of my time in the analyze.
I know Hamo, so yeah.
um, and my question is, do you find that people can be effective in the analyze stage if they're not data scientists? And how do they learn that skill, or what do you find? I mean, you mentioned it briefly already. We just want to.
That's a good question. I think they can be taught. I think there are some people, if they feel a sense of ownership over the feature and they're able to put themselves in the shoes of the customer, they can try to understand this is bad, this is good. And we have good methodologies to do this. And Shreya mentioned a few of them, like later in the chapter, like binary only or preference selection. I think those become reliable enough. What I find that I could label some data in a day and I could get a couple hundred samples, but then I'll spend a lot more time than a day trying to calibrate my LLM evaluator
Hmm.
to match those samples well.
We gotta send you chapter 4. I'll do that after this.
Yeah.
Sorry, we didn't send you that. I didn't want to make you read like so much. um, that yeah, going off of Hamel, I think Hamel, when you ask, like, you spend a lot of time on analyze. I wonder if like big companies just like have the infrastructure and also the people to be able to follow these kinds of cycles well. Like you kind of already know who you can go to at your company for analysis. You have like maybe a role in mind for measure, and often, you know, people a lot of the people taking our course are not at big companies, and maybe that is why they get stuck in analysis to some extent. It was very interesting yesterday at the Lane Chain conference. Someone asked me what role or like who to hire to help them do evals. Like, what are the skill sets they should have? And I found that it was like this weird thing of they should be a data scientist so they can do analysis, but also they have to solve the problems that Eugene said. And that's not all data scientists. So,
It's actually very
Yeah.
hard, and I've been through this exercise dozens of times. I
It
find
sounds
that
like very data sciencey though, even the
it,
measure
it sounds
part.
very data sciencey, right? But I find that the analysis part, if you can put it in a spreadsheet, and you can just tell people to say 1 or 0
yeah.
or left or right, you can actually decompose that. Yes, it takes a bit of time. It's a muscle that the team needs to learn, and it's a muscle also. Writing SOPs, writing evaluation annotation criteria is a muscle. But I think once you build that muscle, you can do it. Like you can spin up a new task within a week.
So
Now the blue box is
yeah,
I haven't
one
figured it out
like
yet.
a question I have is, okay, I agree with you. You can get people to label, you know, binary labels, go through spreadsheets, things like that. One thing I found that I took for granted is the skills involved in studying that data afterwards, like aggregating it, slicing and dicing that data, whatever. You know, we have a lot of skills as data scientists to just do. We think it's like breathing air or something very simple, but I found that people struggle with analyzing it.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay.
The second part of categorize failure modes, that's slightly more tricky, that not everyone can do as part of the analysis box.
Why don't we go into that? I think that will be skipping chapter 2, which, based on this conversation, honestly, it's interesting that we immediately went to that, and maybe it makes me wonder what the role of chapter 2 is, like giving kind of foundations on LLMs to some extent. I'm curious how you felt while you were reading chapter 2, whether you felt that this was useful, like just for folks who've not read it, like it is
Wow.
basically like,
It's insane. You almost like it's like almost you read my mind. I actually have sections 2.2
mm-hmm,
highlighted in orange.
hmm,
I felt and sections 2.4 highlighted in orange. I felt like it was not going as punchy as I would like. I don't know, maybe like for beginners, like some of these basics would be really helpful. But I feel like I just want to get into it. And this was sort of in the way.
hmm,
Maybe it could be an appendix. I don't know. Or
yeah.
maybe it's like I'm not the right audience. But these were the two things I highlighted in orange.
Okay. Sorry,
No,
I'm
this
also
is great,
writing
and
stuff.
this is why we haven't released the book yet, because we're going to iterate on it
Yeah.
a
And, and,
bit
and that's why
with
Shreya
the
was also
students. Yeah.
like asking, right? I wonder if we should have this. And those were the two things that jumped at me.
Yeah, I think you make a good point here. I think the audience that we had in mind here are like software engine, literally the title, engineers and technical PMs. Probably they don't know. I'm assuming that people don't know about LLMs. Um, but I also agree with you. I think that's a lot of stuff, right? Like especially for somebody like you know what LLMs are. You have a lot of experience with them, and therefore you know what you should expect and know what not to expect in ways that other people might not. So I think we can definitely like move parts of it to the appendix, if not a lot. Put reader notes to signpost, like get out of here, don't think about this. Um, I agree. Um, there's, I guess we have a little bit of stuff around, and this was, I think we, somewhere in here, I cited you. Uh, can't
Yeah,
remember.
I think I
Here.
had a sticky note. It's like, hey, look, mom, that's me. Yeah.
Yeah, at some point we kind of transition into how to think about evaluations, what types of metrics, and then also how to think about evaluations, what types of evaluations you want, how to think about getting feedback. I feel like this is a little bit ad hoc, and I'm curious what your take was on how you felt when you were reading it. Did you feel like maybe this would be better with a reordering, or we should just kind of move stuff later?
Let me look at. Section 2.7, right?
Mm-hmm.
Nothing actually jumped out at me. I do think that there's one section I highlighted in. I mean, if we are going into details here, the third paragraph, I feel like the sentence other methods focus on focus instead on relative comparison. I think this is great.
Hmm.
I really like this emphasis on relative. A lot of Likert scales, a lot of grading. It's just too subjective and it's not consistent. I think this relative approach is actually going to help us solve that. But there's another one, which is that which summary is more factually consistent with the source document. I actually kind of disagree with this. I feel like this is a binary statement. It's either factually consistent or not.
Hmm.
In terms of relative, it could be like more things like tone, like which tone do you prefer? So that was a two feedback I
Oh, I
had on
like
it.
that.
Yeah,
I think it's a good point. I think when I was writing factually consistent, I was thinking like which one fits better with the content, but
yeah.
that's not factually consistent.
Like which one is more concise or which one is more comprehensive? There are some things that are just hard to draw a line on. Yeah.
Something that's clearly that makes sense. Thank you for that. Okay, so all of this I'm realizing we'll change that up. But let's get to error analysis in the last kind of 20-ish minutes. So I'll start off by giving a very brief high level overview of error analysis section. This is from Anthropic, by the way. This is not from me. So this is kind of what inspired me in the first place. I would say this is like a year ago where I saw this, and I was like, oh, it's nice to think about this workflow of like what I should be doing as a human being building LLM applications. But I also did not know what this box meant. So that's the motivation for this. And I'll go to the first figure where we think about like what are the steps that you might do when doing error analysis here. And first starts with just coming up with an initial data set. So I'm really excited to ask you this question because you are at a company in which you probably have a lot of data. And when we wrote this for people who might not actually have data. So, for example, generating synthetic data. And here's an approach to coming up with synthetic data that might be better than like simply asking ChatGPT or like asking some random person. Hamel goes on this big rant all the time of how people outsource everything. Don't outsource your data generation. But we come up with a little bit more of a systematic way to do this. So I'm curious what your thoughts were when reading this. Did this first, is this something at all that you agree with at a high level? Then second is, do you guys do this at Amazon or a version of this? What is that and what are we missing?
So, firstly, all opinions my own. I'm not speaking of their own. So there's the
Sorry,
standard
not at
disclaimer.
Amazon.
I
Do
should
you
have
do
started at the
this?
start. Yeah. So
Like, just
secondly,
what do you think people should be
no,
doing? Forget Amazon.
I
Yeah.
I think this is a good idea. I especially like we have a statement in the next page, um, whereby you share the approach where you do a tuple, right? So you have a statement
Mhm,
whereby if we let the LLM to generate full queries in one step, it tends to produce repetitive templated patterns.
mhm,
Fully agree. What I found is that you kind of need human judgment to say this is the outcome I want, or let's just say you are generating again fashion recommendations, and you if you ask it to generate fashion recommendations given the same persona and given the same thing, it's going to be generating very same things. But now you may want to push it in a certain direction. Okay, I want fashion recommendations that I want you to generate queries for edgy fashion recommendations, cheap fashion recommendations, for I don't know, like all the different edge cases that because you have worked in the business and you know what kind of queries your customers are asking, and you nudge the LM in that direction, it will be more useful when you generate the queries.
mm.
Before I even read this, I've actually done a bit of this. Because I just wasn't getting the kind of queries I want. It was not as rich as I want. And this
Interesting.
was the way to do it. It's almost like instead of generating chain of thought, you generate rationale where you give it this is the final output I'm supposed to expect, generate the rationale, and then you feed that rationale into your few shot plot.
Mm.
I think this is the same thing. This is what they achieve, and then you generate. So I think it works. I think it's a good idea.
Interesting. Do you find that it's hard to think about? So I stole this example of the real estate chatbot or whatever
Yeah.
I call it, real estate
From
agent from Hamo, because Hamo has also, you should read Hamo's blog post about how he kind of worked on
WeChat.
this
Yeah.
real actual use case here. But as someone who didn't at all, I had to go through this exercise myself, basically because I'd never worked on it. And I actually found it pretty hard to think about, like, I'm not even a real estate agent. Like, what the heck? What are the dimensions of a query could be relevant? And I looked at Hamel's blog post and I saw some example queries there, and I was like, okay, I can break that down into like things that real estate agents want to do, who they're working with, and there's more. But then like this scenario is not a good term here, but it was something around query ambiguity. And this was not so. This is just something I've seen on a regular basis. Like a lot of people try to submit ambiguous things to agents, and you always want to know how well the agent handles ambiguity. But yeah, I was surprised at how hard I found this exercise to be. And I used ChatGPT a little bit to think about like what these dimensions might be, and it gave me like 15 dimensions. And I was like, okay, I don't know if these are the right dimensions. So I'm curious, both of you actually, how do you go about coming up with dimensions? What parts of it are hard? Is it okay for it to be hard, or am I just weird? I'm sure
No, it
other
is hard. It's very like specific to each problem. It's like the Gulf. So like you build the bridge each time. And these dimensions are different each time. When I was writing the blog post, I was trying to make it concrete and say, oh, these are the dimensions I used this time, but
Mhm.
consider your dimensions, whatever they are. It's not always features, persona, scenarios. But it's more like grounded in, again, the data analysis, like the error analysis. Like, hey,
Mm,
what dimensions do I really need to vary the most, and what failures do I want to elicit with this
mm.
synthetic data generation? And I have that in mind. Like, okay, I'm going to elicit this kind of error because I want this to pop up. So, like, I make sure like that's in the, this like scenario somehow.
Edge case generation. Fortunately, software engineers are very good at this. It's not like a specific to data science, but
Yeah, I would echo what Hamilton said. It is hard. Nonetheless, a little bit of understanding of the business helps a lot. So again, the fashion example.
yeah.
Let's say you're trying to elicit queries, right? And you may know what kind of queries your users send to your fashion advisor. They may be sending query with I actually don't know what fashion pieces look like. I'm just gonna make it up. I have this Air Jordan 2027 shoe. Find me a pair of jeans that matches it. So now the query is very specific to a piece of
Mm.
article. Or I'm going out for a nice summer day, or I'm going to Hawaii. So there's a scenario. Or there may be, hey, find me things of this specific brand. So now you have three things, right? Like there's the item name, there's a brand, and then there's the scenario. So based on this, you can generate queries that meet this scenario. Um, I don't know if
Yeah.
I'm using the word scenario correctly, but that's how I think about generating
No, it's
queries.
not. Scenario is not the right term for me to do. Like
Yeah,
the triple or the
yeah.
basically the tuple of dimensions. Well, what you said about the fashion example reminded me of my footnote here. And this is definitely true of search. This is a long footnote,
Yes.
but basically in search, there's only very few query
Yep.
types, or the taxonomy is small. And I don't know if this is true with agents or not. And I'm
Mm,
curious what your take is there.
I think that I think it's the Pareto. You'll find the Pareto rule.
Mm,
20% of queries address 80% of what users want to do.
mm,
And the same thing for search. So I think that will happen as well. There's going to be a long tail,
yeah,
definitely, and of
totally.
course you may to choose to address or not address that long tail. It's up to you. But I think yeah, you can get wrapped up with just 20%.
Yeah. Especially I'm thinking here with agents, like perhaps even a longer tail, because you could put like essays into these chat GPTs um, in ways that it's harder to put an essay, in, like Google search. Um, Anyways, that was an aside. But so moving on from kind of generating synthetic data and synthetic queries in a more kind of interesting way. So the next part of this kind of talks about how to even like go about qualitatively coming up with the failure modes. And I drew a lot of inspiration from grounded theory, from social science here. They do have names here for these kinds of what's called coding. It's not our engineering coding, but it is like writing on the data. And I tried to cite some stuff for the social science geeks in the room. But I'm curious if this is something that you guys follow to some extent, or you do, and what's similar, what's not similar. So for the audience, I talk about a two-pass approach here. First, you go through every trace and kind of write open notes and label them, and then the second pass, you try to merge these first pass annotations together to come up with different failure nodes. So I'll hand it off to Eugene. What do you think? And then Hamel.
Yeah, I think it makes sense. But I also want to share how this can go not so well.
Mm.
So let's talk about, again, our fashion example. You may have fashion experts that may say that, okay, you know what, I actually can't do fashion. I'm going to change a little bit. I wish I could be using. Let's talk about a translation example. So imagine that you could have errors where the idiom was translated incorrectly, or the text is overly literal, or the text is awkward phrasing. Now, to an expert, this might seem like three things, but you may try to get an LLM evaluator to distinguish between these three things, and you may never succeed. To a layman, to me, I can't really tell the difference as well, like idiom over literal translation and awkward phrasing. Then why not just merge them? So now this is where you actually have to go against your expertise, your expert judgment, who's saying that, no, these are three things by this definition, like whatever. Then there are instances where the category is so big, such as the category could just be a category called accuracy. Now, because the category is so big, and then you try to get an LLM evaluator to catch this, you actually lead to a lot of false positives, right? Because the category is so big, you have to write very broad instructions. Now, if you want to reduce your false positives, it may help to split it up. It could be like, hey, you got the subject wrong. It's male, not female. And this happens in certain languages where nouns have subjects, like Spanish. Or the category could be like, oh no, you got the formality wrong. And this happens in German, where there's a different level of formality. And switching the formality in the middle is very jarring for German speakers, as I come to learn. Or you may have gotten the nickname wrong. So now accuracy is not just accuracy in general. And when you just say, hey, evaluate this translation on accuracy, the model will just evaluate grammar and spelling and everything. And therefore, too many false positives. So
Sure.
I feel it's an iterative process.
Do you feel like this is, I mean, you mentioned automated strategies here. Like, do you think that there's a problem that humans have when they are going through and looking at their data? Or tell us more about that.
I think experts don't have this problem. I think laymen have this problem because we're just not trained to that extent. Like I can't tell honestly, when I look at the data myself, sometimes I struggle to understand the expert's point of view. And then comes the question, right? Are we building this for the experts, or are we building this for the general customer? So you also, it's hard. You need to put yourself in the shoes of the general customer and how they think about this.
Interesting. So if I were to rephrase what you said, correct me if I'm wrong, it's that if you're not an expert and you're looking at this, you don't realize the nuances of how each trace actually should behave differently. And you try to evaluate them all in the same way, maybe. So translation was your example that you gave with, like, German might expect something different than another language. And then you do that and you actually get bad evals. That was interesting. I wonder
the LLMS judges cannot perform well.
Yeah, it's not necessarily an automated thing. I think in this chapter we can be more explicit about it. Is like, this is not an automated chapter. This is like, come up with failure modes. Don't do the annotation yourself. And I think we should be explicit that this is not an automated process right now. And then two, that you need to be an expert or call on an expert to do this for some of the reasons that you mentioned. I think that's good feedback. Hamel,
yeah.
did I interrupt you?
No, I was just taking notes. I can also edit this as well. But yeah, I agree. I don't have anything else to add.
No, you tell people to look at their data all the time. Eugene, I have a question for you.
Wait, Hamel, I actually bought a hat.
So where do you get this hat? Can we share the link? I need to buy this hat. Yeah, I need to buy this hat.
I made it.
You have a
I
like a
made this
store,
hat.
online store or something that
I
you
Can
just
we
went
buy
on. I
it?
just went on Amazon and searched customized hats and just pick whatever that has the font I like.
there's a thing on
Um,
Amazon you can customize your own hat.
I'm gonna buy it and I'm gonna ship it to you. Yeah. So I brought a hat just
Look
for you.
at okay, I'll buy one and ship it to Shreya then. We'll do the circle of
And then
pay it
I'll
forward.
buy one and ship it to him. um,
Oh wow, you can customize it. Can you customize
Exactly.
it in the Amazon interface itself?
You can. You can. I've learned it's quite advanced. You can just type whatever you want in a text box and they'll print it for you. You can even upload images. I didn't bother. I just typed in the text box.
Oh,
well,
interesting.
Sorry, Shreya, we interrupted you.
no, I want
Distraction.
the hat. I look horrible in baseball caps, but I'll get it anyways. So I'll take one for the team. Um, I don't even remember what I was going to say earlier. Oh, yeah. My question was, do you, when you're doing your first pass of error analysis, Eugene, like it's interesting that you thought of using automated evaluators first, because that's something I've literally never thought to do. And like maybe that's because Hamill always preaches like
No, I don't do it. Like I make the people like, you know, it's
yeah.
almost like, I'm forcing you to look at the data.
But
Yeah.
So
but maybe there's
So
something there to like Eugene, what kinds of metrics do you think you like are good for like automated evaluators in the first place, if at all? Or like why do you
so
go to that?
so I want to clarify myself. When I look at the data, the first pass, I do it manually just to get a sense.
Hmm.
But then once we come to the failure modes, and then we try it with the LMS judge, LM evaluator, we may find that the LM evaluator is just not able to get it. That's
Hmm.
where we may need to revisit our failure modes. So either merge them or split them
Mm-hmm.
and then test it with the LM evaluator again. So it's a cycle, right? That's why I like
Yeah.
the analyze, measure,
Yeah.
improve.
Interesting.
After you analyze it, you need to figure out if you can measure it well. If you can't measure it well, okay,
Yep.
back to analysis.
Yep.
So there's an inner loop
Hmm.
there.
You write that
And
down.
that is the loop that is the hard loop, at least for me, where I need to
there's
revisit.
the tools that some of the tools I really enjoy are ones that Shreya has come up with in this area. Eval Gen is one. Have you
It's now
Yeah,
tried?
out. It's now out on
yeah.
ChangeForge.
Same
Thank you.
forge, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
So it has this like workflow, a very innovative human computer interface workflow where it's like you annotate and you build the judge and you
Yep.
iterate on it all in one integrated flow.
Yep. I think that's a great
Um,
idea.
which I think which I wish was a commercial project. Someone needs to. It's a startup waiting to happen.
It's
Honestly,
hard to do. Hard. I mean, it took a year to merge domain, but I think also from like
How about
another.
this, Shreya? You be CEO, Hamel, you be CTO, and now.
No. I'm I'm literally teaching a course. I'm a grad student. Um, yeah. I think doing all of them at the same time is the dream. And there's actually a chapter in here, Eugene, I can also send to you on like how to build good interfaces for human review.
Mm.
Um, not in the first three, but anyways, I know we only have 5 minutes, and I don't want to keep people on much longer. So I might move towards some of the latter questions that I had. And I think there's one more big one.
Just for Hamel,
So
I'm just gonna wear this during the chat. Even
finish
though
the.
I don't really look good in this, but okay.
I
No,
mean,
you look
I can
great.
get
Great.
T-shirts and hoodies and stuff. I'll figure it out. I'll up the ante on this situation.
It'll be like a bucket hat or
Yeah,
something.
the reason why I say this is because Nick White on the YouTube channel, you should just have a flag or a sign in your background. Makes sense. So that's why I figure I just keep it on.
Yeah.
Um. Okay, so the last question I'll ask that's like relevant to the book is around. So I mentioned we did one pass of just writing your failure modes and annotating, and then another pass of trying to group them together, merge them, or refine them in a bit. And one thing that we mentioned here is actually using LLMs to synthesize failure modes out of your open ended annotations. This is something Hamill and I have discussed about how we like to do this, and it actually works pretty well. But we're curious if you do it, or honestly, if anyone else does it, um, or how do you do this merging process?
Whereby you say you take all the failure modes and try to get it to cluster and do it.
Yeah, basically, the LLM as the clusterer.
Yeah, that's what I would do as well. I would just
Mm,
copy the errors and the human explanations in Excel, and then just paste it into some LLM and ask it to synthesize it.
and see. I mean, it's worked for me. I think there's some clunky parts around like when it does come up with the failure modes, then I have to go back into my spreadsheet and like figure out, what failure mode does it map to, so then I can make Hamill's favorite pivot table. He loves pivot tables. Or group
So I
by.
have
You know.
clients that like this so much that because one of the things that we talk about is make your own annotation tools,
Mm-hmm.
and clients like when they make their own annotation tools, they actually build this in now to their annotation tool where it auto groups and classifies failure modes.
Wow.
I have a note here that says that I think it really makes sense. And like everything I do, I treat AI as a first pass draft. It's like
Mm,
everything I just
yeah.
well, not when responding to you guys, like or like just talking to my wife. I don't pass that through ChatGPT. But you put it through AI, it will come out with a very good draft. It will come out with very good clusters. And now to be clear, there's always 5 to 10% manual tweaking you have to do at the end, or maybe as much as 50%. But it always saves you time, and it almost always finds me patterns that I may have missed. So definitely I will always do this.
I love that quote. AI is a very good first pass. And that's it. Um, yeah, I feel the same way about using ChatGPT to do things. I find that my workflow for this error analysis, this chapter 3, is very fragmented across tools. Like, I know we espouse a lot, like building good interfaces, manual custom interfaces, but sometimes I just export to spreadsheet and just do stuff in spreadsheet, and then I will copy and put that in ChatGPT. It'll come up with failure modes, and then I like go back and create a new column in my spreadsheet, manually add things, um, group things
ChatGPT
together,
can output
cluster.
CSV file pretty well.
Yeah, I'm so
Yeah.
bad at it. I don't know why. Maybe I don't have the like. I'm using like whatever pro. I'm so bad at like prompting it to do anything with CSVs. But
Interesting. It
maybe I
depends on how many rows. I've gotten it to return like 50 rows or 100 rows. Not ChatGPT, of course, like Claude.
Claude. Okay,
It's decent.
maybe it's the wrong LLM. I don't know. I also feel very impatient sometimes when it's like thinking about its code that it's writing, and then it's like doing data frame dot head, and then
Yeah.
I'm like seeing all these tokens come out. Uh, Anyways, all right. So 1 minute remaining. So why don't I conclude
I want
with
to say that I really enjoyed section 3.6. I wish there was some way I could highlight this.
oh
The thing is, I wish I could put it in the front of the chapter, but most people wouldn't understand it.
yeah.
You had to pay the effort of the previous sections to understand this very well. But this is a very good section. I especially like paragraphs 2 and 3.
Hmm.
Um, Actually, I like the entire thing. Skipping open coding, use of like scales, treating your SOP as a fixed criteria. Those are the most common pitfalls. Um, those are very
Yeah.
common pitfalls. So yeah.
This is a Hamel section. He's like, what are the common pitfalls? I always love working with Hamel. It's like I'll write something, he'll like, this made no sense. Like
Yeah.
make it clear, communicate better. And you have him to
It
thank.
turns out that being slightly dumb is helpful.
No, it's not
So,
slightly dumb.
so yes.
It's a very good communicator. Anyways, it is 6:31. So maybe any final thoughts? What are you excited for in evals, Eugene? What do you think is up and coming? I feel like the field is stagnating. I'm excited for this to come out. I think there's going to be some new and interesting stuff here, but generally, what's exciting to you?
What I'm thinking about right now is that you have that loop, right? Analyze,
Mm-hmm.
measure, improve loop.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I wonder how much we could make that loop automated. I
Mm.
think there are two loops in this. The first loop is the analyze and measure loop,
Mm-hmm.
whereby how can you get your measurement to align with your analysis? And that's what align eval is, that's what a lot of stuff is.
Yep.
But once you do that, and maybe this LLM evaluator is a little bit lossy, how can you get that to move upstream? Instead of catching the defects, improve the upstream generator.
Mm-hmm.
Um, So you can imagine this like maybe back propagating from your initial eval set to your measurement to your improvements. I don't know how to think about that yet, but I
Yeah.
do know it's very essential. Would love to chat with you on that. I mean, maybe
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Shreya
mean,
is
I
already
think
working on a
we
paper
can
on
already
that.
see the beginnings of it with,
Yeah,
with Align Eval, with Doc ETL, with
yeah,
Eval Gen. They all have are tightening this loop, and those
yes,
ideas are not. Some of them have make their way into products. Like we saw some, announcements from LangChain
yeah,
yesterday or day before, but it's still kind of hidden away, and we none of us here are in the business of trying to create SaaS tools or anything,
No.
but yeah, I agree with you. There's a lot of opportunity to make this not completely automated, but put human in the loop in the right way to make it a
Yeah.
lot more like a lot more automated.
I
and
think this
also
is the
that
exciting problem of the decade. Like, how do you
I think
automate
so.
this in a good way, right? Like, not in a silly way that like assumes no human involvement, or another silly way that assumes too much manual human involvement. But
And also maybe to just play devil's like advocate against myself, right? Imagine you have your eval data set of maybe 400 samples, 100 or 400 samples. Instead of going from the analysis to the measurement and then to improvement, why not just shortcut it? Why not just put your eval data set in the prompt with prefix caching and prompt getting cheaper? That's a 400 shot
yeah,
learning. Maybe that's good enough. Maybe I'm overthinking this, right? We have to do this loop, but just do the simple thing. I don't know.
I don't think you're
Um,
overthinking it. I think you can't get to evals without doing analysis. That's the
yeah,
thing.
you do the analysis
You
and then
like,
just put it into improvement. You don't even have to measure it, maybe. I don't know.
interesting. Yeah, maybe,
Just to
maybe.
make the analysis so delightful and so frictionless that you want to do it, and and you see the payoff so fast that
Yeah.
you just are motivated to just keep doing analysis because you
And just make every analysis a new few shot prompt.
Mm-hmm.
And then you fix the improvement.
Yeah.
Maybe. I don't know. Like
Align
crazy
eval
ideas.
v2 is what I'm hearing.
all right. So when
Christopher,
are we starting the eval SAS together?
I mean,
can
if
I be an
yeah,
advisor and a silent partner?
I'll invest.
It's like that
Yeah.
meme where everyone's pointing at each other.
It's like that meme where there's one person digging, Hammer's digging, and then we're all standing around him.
I'm gonna no, I'm not doing. I'm gonna. I have to work harder at convincing y'all.
Yeah.
Anyways, we're well over time. So
Thank you,
thanks
Shreya. Thank
everyone.
you,
Wait,
Hammer.
wait. Before you go, can you talk a little bit about this book, Shreya? Like, will it come out one day somewhere? Where is it? Where? How?
Oh,
Where? Yeah, all that stuff.
so you want to read it soon? Take the course. You'll get
Sneak
each
preview.
section at each lecture basically, and you'll have the whole thing by the end of V1. We don't know who we'll publish it with yet. We're working on figuring that out, but it will be a book that you can also buy later. But I wouldn't expect it until like end of summer, maybe.
Okay, and if people want to take the course, there's a 35%
Yes.
discount code in the Luma.
Sorry for not selling.
No,
Yes.
no, I mean it's
Take the
fine.
course.
So just letting you know in case it's helpful, or just look through Twitter, look through Twitter on any of us three, and you'll find discount codes everywhere.
Yeah, it starts next week, so I'm really excited. I think it's gonna be super fun. You learn a lot. I know now which chapters to send Eugene. So continuous human review
Just send the whole thing.
and the whole thing.
No,
Okay,
okay, yeah.
send the whole thing. Great. All right.
Thank you, everyone.
See you, folks.
See you, folks. So, Hammer, you stop the live stream and we'll stay here.